Hey, fam, welcome to the Positive Perspectives Podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Leon, and today's show is going to be a great one. We're going to be talking about how we process failure and how we can get in front of it. I hope you enjoy. What's up, everybody? This is Coach Jason Leon, and I'm welcoming you to the Positive Perspectives Podcast. I want to thank you all for joining us on today. We're going to talk about how we understand and process failure. So last time we had a little chat about my background, what kinds of things I'm into, and I'm into a lot of things. That's probably true for a lot of us, but because I am a coach and I have a specific niche, I will keep it to that niche for right now. And over time, we'll, peel back the layers of the onion and we'll do a few more things. Maybe there'll be some singing and some other things that we do on the podcast. But for right now, we're just going to try to delve into the world of the things that I believe that are valuable to us to talk about, to work through as we work through our relationships and work through our life and leadership and all of that good stuff. So, but before we get started, I wanted to devote a moment to a segment that I want to call What's in Your Library. And I'm an auditory learner. Some of us are kinesthetic or tactile. We got, we're hands-on learners, and some of us are visual learners. But me, I'm mostly an auditory learner. But because of my background in the military, I've been able to develop all three of those different learning styles because there's so many things that come at you when you're in the service. So you have to learn different ways of being able to absorb information. But I prefer the auditory style because it suits me. My preference is reading books via Audible. I love the paper book. I love the feel of holding a book in my hands, but that's not always feasible, based on when I'm, running around, either running kids to swim lessons or running to, certain gigs or different things that I got going on. So it's easy for me to read books on drives or things like when I'm in the gym, places where I can't physically put my hand on a book. And so, I've learned over the years that you have to play to your strengths, and that is a strength of mine. And I'm glad that it is because it's so easy to grab information and knowledge and wisdom by listening to it. But again, play to your strengths, right? So the book that I wanted to highlight was a book called The Noticer. It's by an author named Angie Andrews. It's a book that's been out for a while and has a lot of books in the series. There's this particular character named Jones, and he's a perspective bringer, and it's just an amazing book. And these are what I call seminal moments in my development. One of those was the Master Resilience training I mentioned in the last podcast, and this book that my pastor, Bishop John Green, he had recommended this book years ago to our congregation, and when I read it, it amazed me, and I realized, okay, this is part of who I am. I'm that guy. I'm the person that brings perspective to people. I'm the person that sees things from a different standpoint. So anyway, I wanted to bring that book to your awareness, a book that you might be able to pick up. It's on Audible as well, and I wanted to pass it on to you like it was passed on to me. So all right, let's get into it. So let's talk about failing and how we process failing and failure. A lot of us have done things in our lives that, we didn't really know what we were doing before we got into it. And maybe we were unprepared for certain situations, and we walked into those situations and we might have not done so well. And there were times when we've repeated those same things over time because it was something that we really wanted to do, wanted to figure out. And we just kept doing it over and over again. And maybe we progressively got better at it. And so our failures or our failing turned itself around, right? So I want to let you know that, so failing is the verb. So, I mean, in if you want to get technical, failing is like it's a process, it's, I'm failing the 12th grade, or I'm failing this subject. It means it's a process. It's in the process, something can change. You can change your study habits. You can change something in that process to switch from failing to succeeding, right? Whereas failure it tends to be more like a noun, like it's a thing, it's an event. It has this feeling of permanence to it. And so when people talk about failure, they mean like this is the end of a process, that it has run its course and now I must move on to another process. And I will argue that failure isn't final, because some things can be resurrected
Sometimes they just need to be reworked and rethought out. But maybe at the end of that particular process, it had to run its course that way. And maybe that is a failure, but it doesn't mean that that thing that you're trying to do is a failing endeavor. It just means that maybe you have to rework it, and that the way that you were doing it before led to failure. Okay. So I think it's just important that we understand those distinctions. So, because we're going to talk a little bit about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, but I'm also going to give you some tips and some tricks about how to think about failure, so that way we can reprocess it and rethink it, so it doesn't mess with us so bad. Because sometimes the thoughts that we tell ourselves, we are nasty to ourselves. We tell ourselves that you're stupid, you'll never get it, you'll never get there, I'll never be a millionaire, I'll never be able to sing in front of crowds, I'll never be able to talk in front of crowds, I'll never be a CEO, I'll never do all of these things. We tell ourselves all of these crazy stories. And I've heard it said that, if everybody is telling you these stories, you can at least be kind to yourself. So I submit that tell yourself better stories. And I borrowed that from Myron Golden, but I love it. It's a great quote. Tell yourself better stories. Don't sell yourself on the tall tale that you can't succeed. Sell yourself on the fact that if you planted a crop in the best conditions possible and you followed the instructions to a T, then you should receive the expected outcome. Don't be surprised when the crop grows and it does exactly what it's supposed to do, because you did everything that you were supposed to do. So that's the tale we want to tell ourselves, that it can succeed, not the tale that we planted the seed, we've done everything that we were supposed to do, it's perfect. And then we tell ourselves, well, what if? What if a duck could pull a truck? Okay. There's a lot of what ifs out there, but if you're doing everything that you know to do that's correct, how about tell yourself the story of success versus a story of failure? Okay. I'm done preaching. So let me give you 5 actionable steps that will help you shift your perspective on failure. So number 1, reframe the failure as feedback. Sometimes when we look at something that we're not doing so well at, maybe we should look at the information that we're getting as feedback, telling us how to improve the process. What are we not doing correctly? What do we need to tweak? Who do we need to talk to give us some more perspective on what we can do better and how we can switch this failing endeavor to a process that's successful? It's a learning moment. It's something that we can use to improve a process and find out what works and what doesn't, because it can be improved. But look at it as feedback. Don't look at it as it's just random information that's all negative. It's feedback, right? It's something that you can use. It's data, if you will. Number 2, look at stories of successful failures. Thomas Edison, he learned 10,000 ways that the light bulb does not work. He just kept going. And Thomas Alva Edison was that guy where he was told that he would never amount to anything. And there's been so many stories of that in the past, that folks that have gone on to become great people. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're people that we have to like or love or like everything about them, but they weren't the ones that were voted most likely to succeed. They were the ones that were voted most likely to fail, but they found their way to succeed despite their limitations, despite what they didn't know. They just kept working and kept trying and kept learning and kept upskilling. And then they figured out a way to get better at what they were doing. That sometimes our failures can be stepping stones to success. All right, number 3. Growth mindset. So there's this great psychologist named Carol Dweck that highlighted the fact that there's 2 different types of mindsets that people tend to have. There's either a growth mindset or there's a fixed mindset. So I want to encourage you to always look at a situation from the perspective of, how does it develop me? How can I grow? How can I get better? So let me give you some examples. So a fixed mindset, right? It's pervasive. And I say it's pervasive because it tends to drill itself and mine itself into all the nooks and crannies of our mind to make us think that we can't do anything better than what we're currently doing now. It's that belief that you'll never get any better than what you are currently, that you can't rise above your circumstance, that your abilities they're stuck where they are, your intelligence is stuck where it is, your talents are stuck where they are, that you'll never learn, you'll never grow, you'll never develop, right? Where you avoid challenges. Like if it's something that you feel as though you can't figure out or you don't know, or if it's something that's foreign to you, you'll avoid it altogether. And that's a fixed mindset. It makes you avoid challenges. And sometimes it's the challenges in life that help us to develop those muscles for growth and to show us how we can do things better, right? And also, too, another thing with the fixed mindset is when you do hear feedback, you tend to look at it negatively. So I remember when I talked about how we look at a failing situation as feedback, finding out what doesn't work as feedback. And then we're supposed to take that feedback as data points to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But what happens with a fixed mindset is we take that data and it becomes a personal attack. It becomes something negative, something that we can't do. And we avoid criticism altogether. We crawl into a hole. We act defensively because we don't want to hear what the data is trying to tell us. And sometimes the data is telling us exactly what we need to do, but we need to expose ourselves to it. We need to get uncomfortable. We need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. It can limit your achievement with this fixed mindset. It can limit how much you grow. You can be planted in the best garden and be in a situation where you're growing and you're learning and you're being challenged, and it puts you in a situation where you can grow the highest. But if you feel as though it's a personal attack, it's going to limit your potential and it's going to limit your success over time. We contrast that with a growth mindset. So those with a growth mindset, they constantly believe that their abilities, their intelligence, their skills are in a constant state of development. They're in a constant state of growth. All they have to do is dedicate effort, hard work in some cases, sometimes smart work. Sometimes it's not about how hard you work. Sometimes it's about how smart you work. Are you able to learn from other people's mistakes and use that as a springboard for your success? But they see their talents as just a starting point. They don't see that as the highest point. They see it as the basement. And then they know that they can learn from that. They embrace challenges because they realize that in challenges, that's how you grow. How do you build muscle? You build muscle by putting a demand on that muscle group, but they welcome the feedback. It's constructive. It's constructive criticism. And it all depends on how you frame it. Sometimes it might come at you harshly, but how you frame it will determine what you do with it. Stay tuned for next week's episode when we continue our discussion on how we process failure. Thanks for joining us.